Well, just a little spotlight on some of the treasures of Broadway.
And what treasure do you have today?
Well, the Knickerbocker Hotel, which was...
Now, where is the Knickerbocker Hotel?
It's at 1650 Broad... No, I'm not sure the number.
You haven't even been there. It's a real short feature.
But it was called the Times Square Country Club, and it's on 42nd Street and Broadway. And it was where Caruso had a suite that was as big as Times Square almost. Really? It was actually half a floor there in about 1906, 07.
Because you just walked across the street to the Metropolitan.
Right. He actually lived there for a time before he moved to the Vanderbilt Hotel at 34th and Park Avenue. But it was called the Times Square Country Club because the theatrical folk were at 34th and 6th Avenue. That was the theatrical mecca was in where Macy's Herald Square was Herald Square. Yeah. And so Broadway started, actually started like on South Street, moved up to the Bowery, moved up to 14th Street,
Union Square,
Union Square, and then moved up to Herald Square, and then finally around the turn of the last century, it moved up to Times Square and the Times Square Tower, which is now covered with
billboards.
Billboards. They don't have any offices in that, and the Times is long gone.
Yeah.
That moved there at about the turn of the last century, and at that time, Times Square was basically a place that time forgot. I mean, it was a place where there were horse-drawn carriages. The old the first theater to open was the Hudson Theater, which I did a book on, above 42nd Street, and that's on 44th Street. It's open today. It's not a Broadway theater anymore per se.
It's part of the hotel system.
It's part of the hotel, and they do a lot of business meetings and conferences. But it was built by Henry Harris. I noticed you were talking about the Titanic, who went down Titanic.
Yeah.
And his wife put her jewelry in his pockets as he sank to the bottom or was about to sink to the bottom or before he floated up again. Anyway, they fished his body out, no jewelry. She put like $1 million worth of jewelry in his pockets, and somebody snitched it. And that was a terrible thing. And she was supposedly the last person off the Titanic. She went, but whether or not, I don't know, maybe it's apocryphal, she said, I don't care whether I was the last person or not, but I survived.
Yeah.
And she went on to be the owner of the Hudson Theater throughout the 1920s, produced a lot of shows on her own, got Moss Hart started in his career, did his first play. He was forever grateful. And then, led a beautiful life, really. And died. She didn't die a wealthy woman, but she
had a good time.
She had a good time doing it. And the Hudson Theater, but anyway, Times Square at the turn of the last century was a very different place. No neon lights, and it was the Great White Way. Why was the Great White Way? It became the Great White Way in the 20s and the early.
Why? Because of the lights?
Because of the white incandescent bulbs, and then it became the great neon signs.
I like the White Way the best. It's still lit up at night.
It lights up, but it was a different kind. It was theater primarily. It wasn't. It was theater and movies and silent movies too. Yeah. We forget that silent movies were king for a brief period of time, or for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, a long time. Yeah.
I mean, you had Greta Garbo, you had John Gilbert, you had Ronald Colman, you had Gary Cooper, you had Arlene Dietrich. They were all in silent movies. They were a big deal. And they were all in the Broadway area, along with the Broadway theaters. And there were about 70 theaters stretching from Herald Square up to about 60th Street and Broadway.
Really? That's
70 theaters.
Wow.
And Jim, as you look around, you'll not only see old hotels like the Knickerbocker, which actually closed in 1921 as a hotel.
Are they ever going to go back?
There's been talk. I talked to Douglas Durst, who owns a lot of Times Square, owns 4 Times Square, and he says he said, Ward, it's really too difficult to
it's a major
to financially to resurrect that hotel.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen, Jim, is eventually there's going to be a tower a hotel tower next to, there's room for it,
Yeah.
next to the Knickerbocker. I thought that might happen with the Plaza Hotel, actually, because there's room for a tower
Yeah.
next to the Plaza Hotel.
Yeah.
But they sold a lot of it as condos at
Yeah.
the Plaza. I don't think you do the same with the Knickerbocker.